Alright, so it took a bit of prodding, but I actually got out here on time for my scheduled organization day. I didn't want to do it at first, but I did it. I'm out here. So the first thing I started off with was something I had learned from a lady I met down in Austin. She actually wrote a little book or a pamphlet guide. I don't know what you would call it exactly. But she had kind of a 10-minute thing. Take 10 minutes, pick a spot, clean it up, walk away from it. You know, if you continue to apply this 10-minute thing, eventually you will probably make some progress. So I set the timer on my phone, well actually for 13 minutes because it's the same amount of time it takes to cook my pizzas. So I got into it for 13 minutes, and much to my amazement, at the end of the 13 minutes, one, I had made a little bit of a dent out here, and two, I found that I wanted to clean a little bit longer. So unfortunately, I'm still breaking one of the cardinal rules of, you know, the whole floor is not a shelf thing. So at the moment, the floor kind of is a shelf still, but I'm working to better that. The next thing was Kimber Zellick put me on to this idea. You can see these strips right here going across this piece of wood. Magnet strips. They're rather inexpensive and very, very, very versatile. He put me onto this in a comment at the end of my last organizational video, and I think that is going to be hugely instrumental in putting a dent in this. I think it's going to help with organizing the lathe. It's going to help with organizing the mills. I'm pretty sure I'm going to use it as far as organizing my taps and my drill bits. You can see right now on the upper strip right here, I have a few taps on there, just test driving it to see how it's going to work out. And I think it's going to be the ticket for a lot of my taps. I've had that thing sitting on my lathe ever since I removed my big heavy workbench from the garage. So it's just been sitting there, building up chips, getting in the way, stopping me from reusing the space for more practical stuff, or probably more accurately, storing more crap that I don't need to store. So this is just this is just standard taps, and it's before the huge volume of new taps that Kimber Zellick donated to me. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to try and figure out approximately how many taps I want to try and store in this fashion right here, because some of them are going to be too big, I think. Case in point, and besides, this one is a pipe tap wrench. It will have a tendency to try to slip off if it gets jostled too badly. But being a pipe tap wrench, I'm going to keep these guys stored separately because they have a completely different purpose in my garage. But try not to get too far off topic here. The idea is I'm going to probably, I'm still on the fence as to whether or not I'm going to turn this into a tote of some kind, put like a set of feet or something on the bottom and a carrying handle so I can take it from workstation to workstation, or most likely what I'm probably going to wind up doing, I think, is coming up with whatever size board suits the number of taps I'm likely to keep in storage and hang it up over the rear end of my Logan lathe. I think that's the likely direction I'm going to go with it once I know exactly how many magnetic strips I need. I'm starting to try to lay out tools in such a fashion that I can kind of get an idea how big of a space I need for things. Case in point, minus the black case right here, all these other tools are things that are going to ultimately be used on the Hindi lathe. So I'm trying to size up for the piece of plywood that's specifically going to be used for the Hindi lathe. It's going to be drastically smaller than what I've got for the Logan right now because I'm going to share some resources between the Hindi and the Logan. So since it's right behind the Hindi, or basically right behind me as I'm operating the Hindi, it won't be that big of a bother to turn around and grab something that I don't use that frequently. And on top of that, the other aspect I'm probably going to have on top of this if you can see this magnet strip up here, this is kind of the idea I was going after, as far as in the last video I touched on some place to store tools that I'm using in a particular operation for a particular job that I'm doing. Quite frequently, the calipers. I'm almost always, everything I get into, I'm getting the calipers. Now, another guy had mentioned, I can't remember his name unfortunately, but in the comments from the last video, he had mentioned using the shop apron. And while I think that's a fabulous idea, I don't know if I can tolerate this sort of thing. It's great for the marker and it may be great for other things, but I don't think it's going to be good for this. So the theory is I can be performing an operation on the mill. I grab my calipers, use them, put it right back. I move on to the next operation. I grab my drill bit that I pre-select before starting the project, use it, put it back. I have a tap wrench pre-set up with the tap size that I need. Grab it, use it, put it back. The point is I never wind up doing this, setting stuff on the adjacent mill, because you can kind of see it's still just cluttered full of garbage. So again, I have to give a huge thank you to Kimber for putting me onto the idea of these magnet strips. They are going to be a lifesaver. This is probably the single most bestest organizational thing that I've come across in quite some time. So I wound up finding a group of 8 of these on Amazon, and I just got them. So still trying to figure out exactly how best to use them, but I'm getting there. Let's see, what else was on the list? Oh, so I plan on doing one of these for taps, and probably one for drill bits that I don't use all the time. The drill bits that I use the most frequently, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, already have a spot on the Logan lathe. Basically just holes drilled into the plywood back of the lathe. And the theory is, if I wind up using those sorts of things on the mills frequently, eventually I will add them to the mill organization separately, because I always keep a crap load of drill bits in those sizes. But I'll show you the debacle I have at the moment that I haven't really gotten away from, and that is a whole slew of drill bits built up there that just wind up slowing me down, getting in the way. And you can see that I kind of tried to start tinkering with the magnet strip there to alleviate some of the problem. So that is going to be another one of the issues that I slowly work through, and I think this is going to be the solution, the ideal solution for my particular set of circumstances to deal with the drill bits drama. Now, with regards to the larger drill bits, I'm probably going to have to put a little bit of a shelf or a ledge underneath, because some of them are kind of heavy. They try to slip off. But we'll see. I still haven't figured that completely out yet. Let's see here. What was the last? Oh, and the last thing that that dawned on me the other day is I have all of these all of these taps that you see here at the bottom of the screen, plus more now. And at the end of the day, probably 90% of the time, I either use this 3/8 inch spiral flute tap on the lathe, or this 3/8 inch spiral point tap if I'm doing milling or drilling type operations or freehand tapping. So there's absolutely no reason to have this whole thing sitting on top of the lathe for just to take up space, just to collect chips. So the thing that dawned on me is, since I've got this thing about making tap wrenches anyways, I'm going to try making dedicated tap wrenches. So like in this particular case, this is all this tap wrench is ever going to do is hold one of these spiral flute 3/8 16 taps. And I'm going to make, honestly, I could probably get by with 2 wrenches in that regard, because I'll always have these other tap wrenches that can take any other size I want. But if I have a dedicated tap wrench specifically for this size and one specifically for this tap, I can, like you see here, put a hole in it and hang it up at whatever workstation that I'm operating at. Because the theory is, as I'm going through as I'm starting a project, I should in theory start to get a handle for what types of tools I'm going to need to pull out to perform the series of operations for that particular project. So with that in mind, I ought to be able to just pull out that tap wrench or that tap wrench, or if need be, put one of those other taps into an adjustable tap wrench. So this particular style of tap wrench is probably the direction I will ultimately go for the dedicated tap wrenches. I don't know if you can see it in the camera very well, but basically all it is set screws that are gripping and holding the tap wrench, set screws that are holding the tap in the wrench. And while I'm going to change the design up, this is probably basically the rough direction I'm going to go. Is something along this line. Granted, I may go to using a steel body instead of an aluminum body. I don't know yet. Everything that I'm saying in these videos is certainly subject to change in the future. But since I love making tap wrenches anyways, that's kind of a good one for me. So we'll see exactly how that turns out. Maybe I will just have a couple of dedicated tap wrenches. Maybe I'll have 6. Basically serving 1/4 inch through 5/16 and 3/8. Spiral flute, spiral point taps. But we will see on that. This is, still a very fluid thing that I've got going on. Well, you can say this is a very fluid thing that I've got going on in my mind right now. So we'll see what I say now as opposed to what I say a few weeks down the road as far as the organization is concerned. Could be black and white. So anyways, those are the few points that I wanted to touch on today. Hopefully 9 days from now, I will bring you guys back, and I'm sure I won't have a massive amount of progress to show you, but there should hopefully be progress nevertheless. So anyways, that's the end for this organizational video.